Much like special effects in film, the best gaming innovations should feel so natural you won't even notice what just happened was revolutionary and mind-blowing. Sometimes it's the small things like a tiny graphical detail or how the character interacts with the world that will send other game devs throughout the industry frothing at the mouth. And if they're impressed, it's usually for good reason, even if it's something that us stupid idiot players haven't understood. So with that being said, I'm Sai for WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 video games that blew your mind without you realising. Number 10, Red Faction Guerrilla. Making a game where you can destroy everything in sight sounds simple enough. Just have all the structures in the game be made out of balsa wood, styrofoam, and the hopes and dreams of Soul Reaver fans, sorry. But accounting for how the physics engine will react to that destruction is a complicated process, which is why most games don't bother. Red Faction has always boasted destructible environments, even if the first two games failed to really implement them effectively. But Guerrilla, the long-awaited installment by Saints Row developer Volition, took the idea and ran with it, making the game that we all really wanted, one where you can lay waste to literally everything around you. This was done by upgrading the revolutionary GeoMod engine used in the original games into the GeoMod 2.0 engine. This engine created a stress-based collapse model for buildings, ensuring that every building would have weight to it and mass, so that the player has to put in that extra bit of work to it to get it to come down. Number 9, Surgeon Simulator. Whilst every first generation Let's Play star focused on the intentionally wonky controls and mimetic humour, the truth is that there's laughs lurking in every pore of this game and in places you'd never suspect too. When you're at your desk in Surgeon Simulator, you may notice a phone. This phone can be dialed to access some specific gags, but what if you called your own actual phone number? Surely that wouldn't do anything, would it? Well, yeah, no, actually it calls your phone and plays a pre-recorded message for you. Yes, it's amazing. If you pick up your phone, it starts playing a series of noises that is, in reality, part of a convoluted ARG that results in you unlocking a hidden level in the game. This was accomplished by the devs attaching a dial-out server to the game that lets it actually connect to phone signals. As phone tech improves with every passing year, it's anyone's guess how long this mind-blowing detail will actually work properly, so download a copy of the game if you haven't already and experience it whilst you can. Number 8, Metroid. What is and is not mind-blowing really depends on the context of the time period in which it came out. What seems utterly ordinary to a gamer of today would be completely inconceivable 20, 35 years ago. Case in point, the original Metroid. Everyone talks about the revolutionary reveal of Samus Aran being a woman the entire time, but right at the beginning is something that made the game groundbreaking that people nowadays take for granted. Simply going left instead of right. In side-scrolling platformers at the time, this was completely unheard of. Up until then, if an object left the screen towards the right, then that object ceased to exist. But Metroid, at the cost of the game's environments coming off a bit samey, maintained a massive, for the NES, ever-present world to explore, thus laying the groundwork for multiple entire genres of gaming today. And it all started with the first screen of the game where you started off in the dead center and were told, pick a direction, see what you find. Number 7, Pac-Man. Another classic game, Pac-Man doesn't seem like much these days from a modern perspective, but playing it will clue you in quickly why this game straight up took over the entire planet. And the reason for that is the AI programmed into the ghosts, each one unique from but complementary to the other three. Namco achieved the thrilling chases of Pac-Man by dividing the ghost behaviours into two modes, chase and scatter. In chase mode, the default state of the game, Blinky follows directly behind Pac-Man, Inky targets the space most relative to both Blinky and Pac-Man, Pinky's target is 2 dots in front of Pac-Man, and Clyde moves completely at random. Meanwhile, scatter mode, which is when Pac-Man eats a power pellet, has each ghost scurry to the 4 corners of the map to escape him. This ensured that the player will never actually get all of the ghosts in one go. This careful orchestration of AI behaviour is what makes the game so addictive. The ghosts act aggressively and unpredictably without ever coming off as being unfair. Number 6, Alien Isolation. One of the most terrifying games of the last decade, Alien Isolation had a lot to live up to, not only as an entry in the venerated sci-fi horror franchise, but as an apology for aliens, colonial marines. Never forget. And it more than accomplished that by using a clever AI trick to get the Xenomorph the terrifying presence that it has. See, the Xenomorph has 2 brains, that is to say it has 2 sets of AI algorithms feeding it instructions. The first brain knows exactly where you are and what you're doing at all times, but is hampered by having 0 direct control over the body. It instead can only feed instructions in the most general vague sense to Brain 2, which on its own operates purely on direct line of sight, but can also adapt adapt to the player's behaviour patterns. The interplay between these two brains is where the game's masterful tension comes from. Brain 1 is always aware of what you're doing, but can only give vague hints to Brain 2. But Brain 2 learns from each encounter, especially if the player isn't taking enough risks and repeating the same strategies. If you hide in the same kind of hiding place too many times, Brain 2 will immediately know where you are, making the game the masterclass in horror that it is. Number 5. Halo 3. A revolutionary element of a game doesn't have to be its main gimmick, or even something that's around for a terribly long time. Now, this might seem counterintuitive, seeing as how if you've done something extraordinary with your game, you want to share it with as many people as possible, but Bungie had a different idea when they made Halo 3. See, the water in the opening level of Halo 3 was, at the time, some of the most cutting-edge water graphics ever implemented into a video game. The rendering on the water was absolutely insane for the late 2000s. Most noticeable is the physics model of the water, how objects will float and then sink at different times depending on their mass and size. The rendering paints parts of the water to have varying flow rates. When you really look into what it takes to properly render and portray water in a video game realistically, what Halo 3 does for one story mission and a few online maps is kind of incredible. And while Halo Reach would prove to have a more advanced engine, Halo 3 really got the ball rolling. Upstream, okay. Number 4. Horizon Zero Dawn. Getting an open world to run on hardware without making the console explode from the heat is a tricky thing. We're starting to get it down better now, but occasionally certain tricks are still called for to make it run smoothly without actually murdering your dev team. Horizon Zero Dawn found a genuinely clever trick to get around having to render the entire game world all at once, and all without the player ever noticing. Horizon only renders what the player immediately sees in a single straight line. If it's obscured from the player's view, the game just doesn't render it. This not only takes the processing load off of the game, helping it run like butter on any hardware you play it on, but also does it without the player ever noticing once. This is contrast to other games like the original Jak and Daxter, which had to come up with more noticeable tells like Jak tripping and falling over to ensure the player doesn't run into a part of the game that hasn't loaded in yet. Number 3. Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Naughty Dog had to employ quite a few development tricks in order to achieve their desired blockbuster movie style pacing without that pesky player mucking it up because they saw a crate and decided that obviously jumping on the crate would lead to some grand secret or something. The most incredible of these tricks, bar none, is found in Uncharted 2's Locomotion chapter. It's most impressive in how it utilises techniques that games have been using for years to cover or hide loading screens all in one level to make it feel so much more massive and immersive than it otherwise would have been. The train in the level is absurdly long and is running constantly on a series of loops to give the illusion of forward progress. The train cars that have the invisible flag to make the level actually move forward all have very tall walls or trigger cutscenes to mask the transition between environments. It's just one of the many ways that Naughty Dog kept the Uncharted games feeling fresh and exciting despite the player's best efforts. Number 2. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild made waves when it first came out thanks to its do-it-yourself approach to puzzle solving. The shrines scattered throughout Hyrule didn't care how you completed them, simply that you did so. And then Tears of the Kingdom came along and took that to 11 with the introduction of the constructs. The constructs are the most brilliant addition the game makes to the formula. Going on TikTok or YouTube and typing in Tears of the Kingdom will see you inundated with endless clips of people cramming objects and construct parts together to make the most madcap nonsense you've ever seen. Sure, it's mostly just people committing the most horrific war crimes upon the Koroks, but still, the point stands. The constructs are mind-blowing in ways only seasoned game devs could truly break down. The physics of the things alone, how they always perform exactly what task you build them for, provided you build them correctly, without any breaks in the physics engine, is insane. Those mad lads at Nintendo have changed the game all over again with Tears of the Kingdom. And number 1, The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the most graphically intensive, obsessively detailed games on the planet, but one moment in particular blew every industry professional away. The scene where Abby takes off her shirt. Let me explain. See, that just kinda doesn't happen, not in real-time gameplay at least. Character models are typically made with their clothes attached to their body. It makes things easier in a myriad of different ways. But this is The Last of Us 2, one of the most anticipated games of all time, so naturally Naughty Dog went above and beyond. Using the same graphics and character models as regular gameplay way, Abby slowly and arduously removes a blood and sweat stained shirt, showing that the clothes on her character model are completely separate objects from the body. This tiny little detail is one of the most mind-blowing feats of graphical prowess in gaming history, and it's demonstrated in a 10-second scene in a multi-hour long game, blowing the minds of everyone who played it without anyone being immediately aware of it. Obviously, at the heart of The Last of Us is the story, and if you like video game plot lines, sometimes you find yourself wondering, wait a minute, what happened to that part of the story? Well, we can hook you up with 10 important video game plot points that were abandoned. Make sure you like this video, leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. Head over to WhatCulture.com for more content every day. I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.